All right, here we go, guys. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's good to see everybody. Hope you're excited about learning. We're getting close to the end, and it's getting fun. It's getting fast and fun. So here we go, guys. Period 6.4. We call this global trade. So what we have here, the 20th century witnessed active commercial and let me fix all this. Let me get all this big for you guys. All right, here we go. Make it big, about that big. Yes, that's right, that's right. All right, and create a commercial and trade interactions in virtually every region of the globe. The Great Depression illustrated the impact of a decline in trade in one region over trade throughout the world. An example was the manner in which the imposition of national tariffs in Western Europe and the United States weakened global trade in general. Price and supply manipulations by oil-producing nations in 1973 and 1979 affected the globe. Multinational corporations, often using cheap labor in developing nations, increased their influence, especially after the decline of communism. More nations implemented, check it out, what do they implement? This is good. Free market economies. Regional trade associations were organized to facilitate trade and mass consumerism created by a truly global marketplace. The following sections summarize key events in global trade between the beginning of World War I, 1914, and the present. Okay, now let's start with the Middle East. So, in 1960, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, we call that OPEC, you need to know OPEC, all right, was founded to regulate oil prices in the Middle East and to control oil distribution. Southwest Asia participated in the international drug trade. So there you go, the Middle East. All right, now let's look at Asia. Okay, global trade in Asia. By the 1920s, Japanese exports of silk were reduced after the West began producing synthetic fabrics. Between the world wars, China prospered in the global drug trade. All right, Southeast Asian economies based on rubber exports were damaged by the decline of the U.S. and European, what needs a lot of rubber? The automobile. All right, the automobile industry during the Great Depression. By the 1930s, Japanese industrial manufacturers were entering international trade markets. By the 1930s, Vietnam had become one of the world's leading exporters of, I think this is obvious, rice. Like other plantation economies, the production of an export crop left the Vietnamese people without sufficient crops for their families. Before World War II, Japanese regional empires supplied it with food and raw materials. Korean peasants were forced to produce rice for export to Japan and other countries. In 1960 and 1970s, the production of automobiles and electronics in Japan cut into U.S. and Western European manufacture of those products. By the 1970s, South Korea was producing inexpensive consumer goods, textiles, and steel, and automobiles for worldwide markets. By the 1970s, Taiwan competed successfully in global textile trade, including supplying a variety of products to Japan. By the 1980s, Hong Kong was noted for its exports of clothing and heavy industry. Check this out. The McDonaldization of world trade extended to the Soviet Union, all right, which opened a McDonald's in Moscow during the Gorbachev, all right. Oh, I'm spelling that wrong. What am I doing? Gorbachev regime. Singapore became the world's fourth largest port. Its factories produced textiles, electronics, and refined oil. Indonesia exported exotic goods. Korea's, it's their company, Anybody know the name of the car company? Hyundai. Hyundai Corporation exported automobiles, supertankers, and electronics. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. Because of significant industrial growth, India and China have markedly increased their demand for oil. Their demand for oil. China, India, and the Philippines and other Asian nations benefited from employment that was outsourced by U.S. companies. That's right, the U.S. factories going over there. By 2008, India, for several years, the foremost location for outsourcing contracts to other nations such as China and the Philippines. The global economic crisis of 2008 and 2009, this is right when Barack Obama became president, negatively affected the volume of world trade. All right, now let's look at Africa. Africa, here we go. After World War I, most African nations did not have the economic resources to purchase industrial goods from other regions. European and South African miners prospered. They were doing good. All right, in the 1930s, from exports of gold and copper from South African mines. Since World War II, African nations have had to rely on the sale of mineral and cash crops to finance their fledgling industries. Constant fluctuation in the prices of these goods hampered their fledgling industries. Constant fluctuation in the price of these goods hampered economic growth. Nigeria was an oil-producing country and a member of OPEC. Africa exported native art. All right, now let's look at global trade in Europe. During World War I, European nations, and Great Britain in particular, failed to recover from their dominant export position, losing out to the United States of America and Japan. All right, in the first half of the 20th century, most European nations were primarily, how did they get their food, clothing, and shelter? That's right, agriculturally based. All right, rely on sales of their products to Western Europe. The European Economic Community, Common Market it was called, was organized in 1958 by West Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. It reduced tariffs among member nations and created a common tariff policy for other world nations. In 1992, Great Britain joined the European Economic Community and was later joined by Ireland, Denmark, Greece, and Spain and Portugal. In the mid-1990s, Finland, Sweden, and Austria joined the economic community, now called the European Union. That's right. And in 2002, a common currency, the euro, was accepted by most member nations of the European Union, with Great Britain serving as a notable exception. Very good. That's Europe. All right, let's check out global trade in Latin America. World War I and European trade brought prosperity. Things were doing good. Prosperity to Latin America. Latin American nations also had to produce for themselves the products they could no longer import from Europe during the war. A concept known as import substitution industrialization. The Great Depression caused a decline in the purchase of Latin American products. The U.S. was Cuba's leading trade partner prior to 1959. Fluctuation in world demands for sugar made Cuban prosperity uncertain. After the Cuban Revolution, which brought Fidel Castro into rule, Cuba's economy was tied into that of the Soviet Union. All right, Cuba's economy deteriorated rapidly after the fall of the Soviet Union. Colombia was a major participant in the international drug trade. Brazil exported exotic goods. Venezuela, an OPEC nation, and Mexico were oil-producing countries. At the beginning of the 20th century, Latin American nations were more heavily industrialized than ever before. That's Latin America. And global trade in North America. During World War I, U.S. exports rose during World War I so rapidly that for the first time in its history, the U.S. became a creditor nation. After World War I, the U.S. exported motion picture films. The U.S. also distributed food such as wheat and corn to war-torn European nations after both world wars. By the 1960s and 70s, the U.S. fast foods had reached locations around the globe, including the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China. Industrial supplies continued as a major U.S. export throughout the 20th century. In 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA, went into effect. NAFTA abolished tariffs between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Opposition, the NAFTA broke out among Indians in the Mexican state of Chiapas. All right. In Seattle, Washington, in 1999, demonstrators protested against the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. The WTO was established in 1995 in order to organize world trade. U.S. trade created a worldwide diffusion of its products and culture. Advertising led to familiar logos and global recognition of U.S. products. Okay, now let's summarize all of this. The 20th and 21st century global economies were so interconnected that a crisis in one sector affected nearly all regions of the globe. Former colonial economies had often had difficulty recovering from the production of a plantation cash crop to a diversified economy. East Asian nations proved fierce competitors in the export of automobiles, textiles, and electronics. OPEC oil prices became a major focus of world attention. Mass consumerism characterized the later years of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century as U.S. values and products diffused throughout most of the world. All right, guys, global trade. There's a lot more to it. I hope you enjoyed that. Go read your notes again and again and again.